Hello and a very warm welcome to the brand new edition of Policy Watch. I'm Kriti Mishra. Today we'll take a closer look at the India Cooling Action Plan. It's a long-term vision to address the cooling requirement across sectors. Reduction of cooling demand by 20 to 25% and refrigerant demand by 25 to 30% by the year 2037 are the goals of this plan. Cooling requirement is cross-sectoral and an essential part of economic growth. It is required across different sectors of the economy, such as residential and commercial buildings, cold chain, refrigeration, transport and industries. And to know more about the topic, I'm joined by Mr. C.K. Mishra, Secretary, Ministry of Environment and Forest and Climate Change, Mr. Ajay Shankar, Distinguished Fellow, TERI, Professor C.K. Varshney, former Dean, School of Environment Sciences, JNU. Welcome to Rajya Sabha Television, all of you. Mr. Mishra, let me begin the show with you. It is indeed a proud achievement for India because India became one of the first countries in the world to develop a comprehensive cooling action plan. Tell me about the relevance and significance of this plan.
See, we are not among the first. I think we are the first to have come up with a comprehensive plan. And it's a very pragmatic plan that we have drawn up for the country because given the cooling requirements that are going to come and the fact that we need to reduce the demand for refrigerant and cooling, there had to be an action plan which involved all sectors. So this is a plan which sets goals and determines what are the actions that we need to take, keeping in view our commitments at the Montreal Protocol or the Kigali amendments that came into force. So we are actually, as you said, looking at reducing refrigerant demand and cooling demand. But I must say that this entire plan is not just about cooling. It's about thermal comfort. The focus is to provide thermal comfort to the people of India as any tropical country would need in terms of cooling and better place to live.
Right. So thermal comfort, of course, we're going to come to it in just a bit. Talking about Montreal Protocol. Coming to you, Mr. Shankar. Mr. Mishra mentioned about Montreal Protocol. In line with that protocol, India has decided to curb those elements that deplete ozone layer. Of course, around 197 members of the United Nations signed this treaty. Tell me, what are the provisions of this treaty?
This is aimed at replacing the refrigerant used in traditional refrigerators with newer materials so that ozone emissions come down. But coming to the climate, this cooling plan, I would like to say that this is a very timely initiative because in terms of a low-hanging fruit, where we see convergence between the interest of the consumer, the interests of the economy, and the interests of mankind in terms of climate change, this is a very fortunate convergence that we see in the initiative taken by the ministry right now.
So all these stakeholders have been taken on board. Professor Varshney, tell us, how will this plan help us in enhancing energy efficiency?
You see, the question is that the present day cooling systems that we have are not having very high energy efficiency. So the focus of this plan is to really do research and to improve these devices so that the energy efficiency increases and our requirement for extra amount of energy gets reduced. That's number one. And which will help us in meeting our Paris commitment of reducing carbon emission. That is number one. Second, that it is important that we should really see that how we are able to maintain the human thermal comfort. That is very important and that's very critical. And in this respect, I will say that this plan has made a very good beginning to create and focus thinking on this aspect. It has 3-4 very important elements. Element number one is to replace a refrigerant which is far better and does not have high global warming potential, because most of these chemicals which are ultimately released into the atmosphere, either during the time of filling there is leakages or when they have done their life, these equipments, they are just thrown and the material gets leaked. Although they need to be really rescued as much as possible even then. So they have got a very high global warming potential, many, in fact, hundreds of times more than carbon dioxide. So they really add to the global warming. So if we are able to replace by newer materials which are possible and for which there is a question of perfecting the technologies such as carbon dioxide, ammonia and so on. So I think there are candidates available which need to be perfected, and this plan provides a very clear-cut mandate of really pursuing research and to really bring together the technology and the people who are expert in universities and academia, to bring them together along with the manufacturers and the other stakeholders, so that we have got a technology which we can really own and which we can really push into this in the new generation cooling devices, be it is transport sector, be it is domestic sector, or be it is refrigeration requirement for others. One thing that I would like to say, that it is a very good beginning, because we know that because of the global climate change, the temperatures are going to rise, and I think there will be a dire need of cooling the systems, because human beings cannot really live for very long time at temperatures which are likely to be during the summer reaching 39 and 40 and plus. So I think this kind of human endurance really clearly shows that we have to do something about cooling to prevent mass deaths, because we have seen that when there is a strong heat wave, even in France and UK, people have died in hordes. So I think this is a kind of scenario which is going to unfold very soon, and already we know that this March has been a very abnormal temperature high, sudden, and they say that is going to remain like that for quite a period of time. And I was in Bhubaneswar and I found that their temperature was reaching up to 42, and human endurance is not there to really sustain themselves for 42. One thing I would like also to mention, that since we are talking of all India level, it's an all India plan, and for that we have to see that most of this plan seems to be focused on urban centric, where the people who are working, patients and so on, who are working in the field, there is very little that has been done for that. But I am sure that since they are going to have a kind of a steering committee or some kind of apex committee which will take into account, for example, in Delhi, let us say, those who are living in building are fine, but those who are living in pavements and those who are daily wage workers, what this plan does not really take care and provide the kind of support and the umbrella from the heat and temperature. So I think those aspects will ultimately going to be sucked in, but I think as a beginning, it's a very good beginning, and I think over a period of time, it has to my mind, need to enlarge, because they are the most vulnerable of all in terms of temperature stress.
Absolutely. So I'll take your concerns to Mr. Mishra. Mr. Mishra, how would we address these issues that were mentioned by Professor Varshney?
See, let us take up his last point first. The plan does talk about economically weaker section housing facility, but it certainly does not talk about so much about the people who are not living in formal housing structures. Now, something needs to be done for them, certainly. And I fully agree that human endurance being what it is, we need this. Now, you see, at the end of the day, it's more about energy efficiency and cooling efficiency than anything else. And one of the reasons why I'm saying this is that let's take air conditioning for example. The penetration of air conditioning in India at the moment is about 6 to 7%. Even in the best case scenario, about 15 years or 20 years later, you will have about 40% penetration, which means 60% of the population will still be dependent on fans and coolers.
Absolutely.
So that is where our focus should be. How do we make that cooling efficient and better so that that population is able to endure? Second, I mean, apart from the cooling comfort that you are providing, there's a huge amount of work to be done in space cooling, which is buildings. It is the technology of building which will determine the kind of thermal comfort that we are going to provide in future, apart from other factors. So these are things we need to really work on. And, you know, the plan is comprehensive. Of course, it doesn't cover everything. No plan can afford to cover everything. It's comprehensive. And what we have tried to do is make it as doable as possible. And this is one of the plans which was discussed thoroughly with not just government stakeholders, but all private industry, business, everyone. And it's a combined kind of an effort that India is making. We do have our own concerns. For example, our building norms right now are not being adhered to.
Right.
Our demand in transport sector is going to rise every day. So we need to cater to that, and as the economy grows, the requirement will rise. You can't stop that from rising. What we need to do therefore is bring in more efficiency, and that is what the plan does and intends doing actually.
And probably that's where we need National Building Code. But coming to another very important aspect that you mentioned, that is about thermal comfort. The plan seeks to provide sustainable cooling and thermal comfort to all. But many experts have questioned the benchmark of thermal comfort.
See, the concept of thermal comfort basically is to give a basic cooling, whether through air conditioning, through fans or whichever means, to everybody who's around. Now, thermal comfort benchmarking can be done in different ways. The way this plan has looked at it is that majority of the people who are living in structures in India, how do we provide them thermal comfort? It is about spaces, it is about movement, it is also about the cold chain facilities that we have. So it's all put together, because at the end of the day, this is reflective of health and lives. This is going to impact that. And Professor Varshney was talking about the emissions. HFC replacement remains to be a critical thing, and I must inform viewers through you that India is doing extremely well, and the Indian industry has really risen to the occasion in replacement of HFC. That is the gas we are trying to replace for cooling.
Absolutely. So we are trying to replace HFC. Mr. Shankar, refrigeration and cooling causes around 10% of global CO2 emissions. How will this plan help us reduce our carbon emissions and also meet intended nationally determined contributions?
See, if you look at buildings, I think what this plan will do is trigger a change in the way our architects and engineers design and construct buildings. Because it is possible to increase the energy efficiency of thermal comfort in buildings through technology and better materials. This has been a neglected area so far in India. Now, this will hopefully lead to a day where you will see advertisements of builders saying that we provide the least cost thermal comfort or we provide energy efficient buildings. Today the advertisements are about trees around the building or being next to a golf course. So hopefully this will lead to advertisements and competition among builders who will say that these buildings are greener and more energy efficient. Now, it's a low hanging fruit. When that happens, the consumer saves money. So as a consumer who is now using air conditioners, and the people in India who start using air conditioners is rising quite dramatically. So people who use air conditioners, the part of the electricity bill which hurts them is the bill relating to air conditioners, because everything else has become cheaper. In fact, as far as lighting is concerned, the LEDs have made them so efficient that it's now the poorest man can afford lighting without difficulty. So that is one big change. The second big change which would happen is that if the thermal cooling or thermal comfort through refrigerators or air conditioners is done in a more energy efficient manner. So that's the second level of energy efficiency. And the third transition would be that the current technology of air conditioning gives way to other technologies which could involve a disruptive change. Now that disruptive change has to be imagined and realized in reality, but if you go back to pre-industrial times, societies in India had achieved great comfort by using the wind tunnel effect in old forts and palaces, or the basement effect by having tehkhanas which were very cool. So how would scientists and engineers and technologists look at a disruptive change from the present air conditioner, where some elements of the air cooling low cost benefits are merged with the greater comfort which air conditioning gives? These are futuristic thoughts, but this program will drive change in that direction. And I think fortunately India today has enormous creative ability in terms of innovation and technology, far more than it had once upon a time. And so this will channelize that energy in this direction.
Probably Mr. Mishra can give us a perspective on that. What are these disruptive changes and how do we implement them in the country?
Well, disruptive changes first is building technology, as was being said. And whenever we think of cooling, we normally think of refrigeration or air conditioning. We need to think beyond. There is cooling technology which is coming up which does not use refrigeration or air conditioning. So those kind of technologies will have to be used which are not just energy efficient, but the greenhouse gas emission is minimum. And there are buildings which are being built. So as was pointed out by Mr. Shankar, I mean slowly the movement will have to be towards those energy efficient buildings. Because I say buildings largely because that is 60% of the cooling requirement or the cooling demand that we have in this country. Next to that is the transport sector only. So we need to really focus on the second disruptive technology that will come in is the way we cool, the way we air condition, the kind of material we use in the air conditioners, and the way the air conditioners are designed to meet the twin objective of reducing refrigerants as well as energy efficiency. You see, in terms of emission and pollution, if you are reducing on cooling refrigerants, the emission is coming down, but you are using excessive power, your emission at the power end is high. You need to meet both.
Right.
So it is energy efficiency. The disruption has to come in both energy efficiency as well as cooling technology, plus the building technology.
Right. But you mentioned about transport sector. Professor Varshne, over 96% of transport cooling energy consumption comes from private cars. How do we fix that issue?
No, I think it is possible to really look into these very carefully, because once we have to redesign the cooling system, then it is possible to increase the efficiency of cooling as well as change the refrigerants which are being used at present and which are not so efficient. So I think there is a lot of scope of improving, and I think the plan very clearly says that their emphasis would be to research and to really continue improving the efficiency of these two systems so that our energy need remains reasonable. And I must say again that we have also set a bar on the human comfort, and we have said that overcooling is also to be not promoted. And I think that temperature 24 has been set, which gives a reasonable comfort within indoors. One more thing I can tell you, that the building technology is a very energy guzzler. And I think the kind of materials that are used, the cement and so on, they are all very energy intensive. And there is a great scope in reducing that. And this plan encourages us to build materials, take material which are energy efficient, where embodied energy is the minimum. Embodied energy means the amount of energy that goes in making a material is less. That is number one. Second, you know, the white painted roof have been shown world over to be highly energy efficient in terms of providing cooling comfort. So I think this simple device which can be done. Second, that most of our buildings, windows and doors are not airtight, and as a result a considerable amount of energy is drained. And I think all these are put together improves the building efficiency in terms of cooling. And to that an extent it reduces our energy demand, and to that an extent it reduces carbon dioxide emission. So I think all these are small little things, but then it is a kind of a package of things which may be looking as simple, but they are having lot of effect because they are continuing and running and they are being used on a large scale. So I think the building technology, as well as I should say the designing of the cities, because our urbanization is going to grow and we are going to have more and more of expansion. So I think the new colonies and others, they need to come so that one building provides the shade to the other, in a sense that the incoming solar radiation is reduced and therefore the heat load gets reduced. I think all these things are possible and it is achievable, and therefore the technology of making building, the technology of using materials. So I think there is a lot of emphasis in this program of material research, where we can really design and look into new materials which have got less energy demand and less embodied energy. So in that way, I think it provides a platform from which many things are going to take off. And I think this is only the beginning, and the committee of the steering committee, which they are really trying to formulate, will provide a roadmap by which they will involve and provide these kinds of things, I should say a momentum, so that it really takes on. And if we do this, I think it is a time for us to steal the leadership also, where we can really provide the technology to rest of the world, and perhaps our experience will be of great help to many other countries which are having lots of problems in terms of containing their urbanization and dealing with these emerging problems.
Absolutely. So the focus has to be on energy efficiency. Let me add another dimension here. Mr. Mishra, plans are also afoot to skill 1 lakh technicians. What's the roadmap ahead? How does your ministry plan to do this?
See, we realized that one of the biggest problem, and Professor Rajya was mentioning about leakage, is untrained, unskilled technicians attending to ACs in India. So, one of the things to do really is to skill them so that they don't allow wastage, leakage. And we decided that we will take up this skilling program on a large scale in this country. 1 lakh mechanics, so to say, AC mechanics will be trained so that they are more efficient. Now, this training program is going to happen across the country. We have identified locations, we have identified institutions which will impart this training, and then these will be certified mechanics who will be available. And what we are also trying to do is that there should be a public procurement of these certified mechanics, which essentially means that in the government institutions at least they should upfront take only them, so that that kind of a saving of energy and saving of the gases we can do.
Right, so skill development is of paramount importance. Mr. Shankar, tell us about the linkages of cooling with sustainable development goals.
If you get the kind of energy efficiency that we are dreaming of and which I am sure we will achieve, then as I said in the outset that the consumer saves a lot of money. So he has a buy-in. Then the construction firms and the technology firms as well as the builders will see it as a marketing advantage that we are selling green buildings. In fact, I would like to use this occasion to suggest that just as we have star labeling by the Bureau of Energy Efficiency for refrigerators and air conditioners, maybe on thermal comfort, they should come up with the star labeling, and a builder who says I have a 4-star or a 5-star rating can command a price premium in the market. Now, with all this, the CO2 emissions will come down, because the fact of the matter is that as incomes rise in India, I see a day where every Indian will be living in thermal comfort and working in thermal comfort. So the present projection is 55% in 15 years, but by 2050 I would hope that every Indian has the same comfort as I have. So that is the kind of demand, and if 30% of that demand is reduced by energy efficiency, then that's the saving in the global warming and carbon emissions that we achieve. And the 30-40% reduction is huge. And if we are successful on this trajectory, then the time may also come by 2040, 50, where more and more of our electricity is coming from renewable energy, and therefore the additional demand will not add to global warming.
Yes, Professor Rajya, you wanted to make a point. I have last 2 minutes.
I just want to make a quick point that this kind of a cooling comfort that we are trying to really provide is very important, and the economic benefit of this is tremendous, which we have not talked about. First, when you have a right cooling comfort or right temperature, the productivity of human beings and innovative thinking increases. And once you are under heat stress, neither you are capable of producing. So I think the individual's capability of doing work as well as to really accomplish tasks will increase tremendously, which has got enormous economic advantage, apart from the energy saving and reduction of carbon dioxide. So I think I must make this point very clear that it has got enormous economic advantage that is going to accrue, provided we are able to really put forward and implement this plan the way that it is trying to really visualize. That will be something very important. And lastly, I will say that the scope and the umbrella of this plan has to increase in order to include plants. The green roof as well as green pavements are very important in reducing the heat load in the urban situation, and will be lasting, sustainable, and with zero energy input and so on. So I think there are lots of things that can be done which are small, but then their cumulative effect and their collective effect will be very, very significant and very, very rewarding.
So the economic potential is huge.
Yes.
Let's close the show with a very important aspect, and that is of farmers. Mr. Mishra, how will this plan help farmers in terms of better cold chain technology?
Farmers. See, technology has to move on to help them do what they are doing. What this kind of a plan does is provides that platform where those who can provide new technologies can come and work together. And it is in that direction that it will help them take this up in a big way, in terms of equipment, in terms of technology, in terms of devices.
And also in terms of cold chain.
Cool.
So all that, gentlemen, thank you so much for talking to us and making this discussion very erudite. So India Cooling Action Plan will look for synergies for securing both environmental and socio-economic benefits. That's all we had for you in this edition of Policy Watch. Thanks for watching and stay tuned to Rajya Sabha Television.